I am working on recording my CISSP course and making progress, but I thought I'd just go live sometimes and talk about CISSP. So here we are. So let's start at the top. So first domain, CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Confidentiality, keep the secret secret. Could be intellectual property. It could be information about processes you have within your business, personal data, health data, personal data. We really need to protect personal data. But anything within the business that needs to stay within the business is protected under the logic of confidentiality. The main things we do with confidentiality is encrypt. Encryption is critical. We also need to make sure that we're controlling permissions, identity and access management. That domain is really very critical. I've been working on figuring it out, and I haven't fully figured it out. But a lot of people that are unsuccessful in the test really have a hard time with that domain. It comes up as one of the weakest domains for them. So don't presume that you understand it. It is definitely something that we think we know and understand, and we don't really know and understand identity and access management. So what we have to do is make sure that we're controlling permissions, we're controlling APIs. It's not just people and what permissions they have, what permissions they need, but it's also making sure that our software, our APIs and things like that are actually controlled properly. Hard coding credentials into APIs is a bad choice. Bad choice. Error. All right, so confidentiality. Second element is integrity. Integrity is all about accuracy. It's my favorite word. I've had some arguments about integrity and accuracy. Integrity is making sure that it's whole, it's complete, it hasn't been changed, it hasn't been modified. It is exactly what the user left in the system. So it hasn't been a worm, there's no viruses, nothing's going in and modifying data. Users that don't have the right permissions can't go in and modify the data. So we need to make sure that it can't be changed or modified. Again, we go back to identity and access management to control permissions. If somebody only needs read permissions, they only get read permissions. They don't get write permissions. What was the first thing I said? There's more thoughts there. I don't remember what the first thing I said was. Oh, integrity. So when a user enters information into, say, a form, if they don't enter the right information into the form, it's not my fault. I can't control that. It's not about making sure that the user has put in the right name, the right phone number, or something like that into an interface. If a user types in a number wrong, that's their problem. But whatever number they type in is the number that remains. We need to make sure that we maintain that integrity, that the accuracy of the data is exactly what we need it to be. Are there a chat comment somewhere? Oh, there we go. All right. Oh, lighting off. Okay. So integrity is making sure that the data is not modified. So controlling the permissions to make sure that people can't get in and modify the data. One of my biggest concerns, God, there's so many concerns. But earlier this year with DOGE getting into all of the different agencies, what did those kids, and I'm going to call them kids, what did they do? What data did they collect? Did they change? Did they modify? What permissions did they have? We have an awful lot of problems that we could possibly be dealing with in there. All right, so confidentiality, integrity. Last one is availability. Availability is making sure that when we need access to data, it's there. It has to be available, it has to be accessible to the people that need it when they need it. Now, everybody doesn't get access to everything that they want. Trying to read chat. And how do you? But everybody doesn't get access to all the data that they want. It's back to confidentiality. What level of permissions does somebody need? Now, when we talk about availability, normally what we're going into is the level of redundancy, availability, accessibility, so load balancers, redundant fans, power supplies, stuff like that inside of equipment. We need to make sure that that's there and it's working as it needs to be so that things are available. About 5 weeks ago, Amazon had a major problem. They were updating databases or something, and they knocked out a whole ton of services all across the US at least. And I don't know what they did. Meta, it was several years ago, but Meta, fine company it is, decided on a Wednesday morning to update routes somewhere in their core network. And whatever they did really screwed things up. They really made a mess. And it knocked WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram off the air for about 6 hours. So availability, what we need to watch for is what could cause things to break, what could cause things to fail, what could cause things to not be working exactly as they need to be working. I'm glad you like coffee. I like coffee. Drink a lot of it. All right, so confidentiality, integrity, availability. Now, usually, so traditionally with CISSP or security, information security, we just have that, the CIA triad. But what we've been doing as of late is adding in two more that come up a lot, and it's non-repudiation and something that'll come to mind. So one of our next questions, and it really falls under integrity, is when somebody sends you a message, how do you know who it came from? Somebody recently was sent an email or something to come into court to finish their green card, the last step or something, but it was actually ICE luring them to the courthouse so that they could be kidnapped and taken someplace. So how do we know when we receive a message who it's actually from? It's easy to change email addresses. It's very easy to change cell phone numbers and make it look like it's coming from somebody it's not coming from. So validating that information, non-repudiation and, can't think of the other word, but being able to say, I know exactly what kind of data, or I know exactly the source. I know who it came from. So I know I should open this email. I know I should open up this message and click on it, click on the attachments or anything else that we have in there. So it is critical to make sure that the non-repudiation and I still can't think of the other word, but it has to do with the same thing. With non-repudiation, can't, repudiate, deny. I cannot deny, I cannot argue, I did it, is what we're looking for with non-repudiation. So putting in controls like that is getting more and more critical in our networks and in our environments. Oh, what else do we have? All right, so identity and access management, definitely a very large topic. It's got its whole domain over in CISSP. But there are non-repudiation and no, where is that word? All right. Okay, so a couple more terms: least privilege and need to know. Least privilege is we don't want to give anybody more permissions than they should have. It's kind of like, I'm going to date myself. Do we still have this with cars? A key that gets you into the car but doesn't get you into the trunk of the car, called them valet keys. So you could put stuff in your trunk and then the valet couldn't get into the trunk because they only had a key that would get them the ignition and the doors. I don't think that works in modern cars. But least privilege, controlling, I haven't thought of that in a long time. controlling the level of permission somebody has. It's really a very, very difficult thing to accomplish, but it is a really good goal that we should have, is to control the permissions to as little permission as possible so people can get in less trouble. Need to know gets into, do you require this data? Least privilege is a permission. Do you have read permissions, write permissions to a piece of data? But the first question is actually need to know, do you require this data to be able to do your job? And if you don't, then we don't give permissions. These are some of the most critical concepts that get applied across all of information security. It's a nonstop process that we have in place. Let's see. I'm going through a CISSP study guide, just starting at the front. Let's talk through things. Why? Because I like talking about this stuff, and I don't have a class today. So here we are. Subjects and objects, another fun topic. Subjects and objects are theoretical language. When you're dealing with something like CISSP, you're dealing with theory, not reality. But it's the theory that we should be applying in reality however we need, whatever actually matches our environment. So, subjects. Subjects are active. Subjects take an action. Subjects do something. I pick up my cup of coffee. It's only 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So a subject could be a user. Subject could be an application. Subject could be just about anything inside of a system. Ooh, green screen. I had a button, but I didn't know what the button was. How do I turn off green screen? There. All right, hit all my buttons now. I was like talking about subjects. So subject could be a process. Subject could be a script. Subject could be an API. It's something that's trying to access a piece of data, something that's trying to access a process, trying to do something inside of a computer, or a user. Objects are passive. Objects just sit around and wait. It's like all the data that you have on your computer, or all the data that you have up in the cloud or on a storage device someplace, just sitting there. It's data at rest. It could be, the object doesn't have to be data. It could be the applications, like all the applications that are over there on my computer that are not open, that I'm not using right now. They're passive, so they are objects. The subject takes an action on the object. The object just waits. So the object could be data, processes, operating systems, applications, just about anything. Where we have subjects and objects, data should be on the object side, users should be on the subject side. Those two stay there, but everything else in a computer could either be the subject or the object. It's all just a matter of what's taking the action. If it's taking the action, it's reaching out and trying to do something, it becomes the subject. All right, fun topics, subjects and objects. What else do we have? Oh, due care and due diligence. Oh my gosh. Due care and due diligence. This one makes people nutty. So I go with one of the recommended books from ISC2, which is Black's Law Dictionary. If you want a definition of a legal term, go to a law dictionary. It's the best place to go. So due diligence and due care. Due care is making sure that we have a responsible level of care, that we're doing what we need to do in order to prevent harm or injury from happening. Due care is often a legal requirement. Like a business, if they make a product and they sell it and it gets people sick, hurts people, kills people, something like that, then we have a due care problem. Due diligence is making sure that we choose the right actions. It is where the prudent man or the prudent person lives. Due diligence is the prudent person. There's a lot of wrong information in some CISSP books or questions that I've seen, but in the legal dictionary, due diligence is where we have the prudent person or prudent man rule. So the prudent man or the prudent person rule, what it means is that if something were to happen, we ended up in court and we had a jury of our peers, and there was an explanation of this is what happened, this is how the harm happened, this is the injury that happened, this is the bad, and this is what the company did to try and prevent any kind of harm or injury from happening. Would the people on the jury, our peers, say that what we were doing is the right thing, or what we were doing is not the right thing? Like, we know better. We know better, we shouldn't do that. The simple example I always use is just a cable running across the floor, running across the room. It's a strange place. We need to plug something in, power just temporarily. So we run a power cord across the room until we can sort things out. If you do that, it's very possible somebody could walk by and trip on that cable. So what you need to do is tape it down, cover it with a rug, cover it with a rubber mat, do something, put up signs to say, please be careful, there's a cable. But if you don't do any of that, you run a cable across the room, somebody trips, falls, breaks their arm, and sues you, and you end up in court, would the jury of your peers say that you did the right thing? That's the prudent person rule. And we know that you should tape the cable down, and if you didn't, you did nothing. You just ran a cable across the room, then you did not display due diligence. So due diligence is making sure that we're taking due care. But due diligence is where the prudent person lives. Now, when it comes to laws and regulations on the CISSP test, you really shouldn't see any. In a lot of the CISSP prep books, you'll have information in there about HIPAA, Sarbanes-Oxley, FERPA, FISMA, all kinds of American laws and regulations. It is very hard to be international. I'm American. I might be able to pull off looking like a Canadian. Open my mouth, I can still pull off I'm Canadian or I'm American. It's the Americas. But trying to be Spanish or German or French or something, it's not going to go so well. I need power. Here we go. So the CISSP books, people have a hard time controlling things and not putting too much American stuff in those books. So you don't need HIPAA, you don't need Sarbanes-Oxley, you don't need those for the exam. But there is one major law that I do recommend that you look into, and it's GDPR. Calling it the law, but each country in Europe has a law of their own that is comparable to, has all the requirements that GDPR has in there. So each country has their own law. Give me a little girl. I have a little girl coming to join us. There we go. Makes everything better. So GDPR requires every country to protect personal data. So every country has their own law. So GDPR and the basic requirements of GDPR is definitely something you need to know for this test. And when it comes to privacy, any kind of privacy questions, she's an aggressive little licker. This is Lily. Hang out with me and Lily for a little bit. We can talk about CISSP. So GDPR is definitely something to know. And from an American perspective, GDPR seems very weird. It just doesn't make sense because we don't we don't do this. We don't protect personal data. That is a definite. And from Doge and ICE activities this year, it's definitely clear that we don't protect personal data. I'm just going to eat my hair, and then that's a problem. So GDPR, the basic requirements of GDPR is that personal data, or PII, we say more in the US, personally identifiable information, must be protected. First thing with GDPR is it's an opt-in system. If you don't want to give a company your name, address, phone number, or anything else, you don't have to. US. In the US, it's opt out if you're lucky. Responding to an email that says something at the bottom, click here to opt out. Click here to opt out often just permanently opts you in because it confirms that it's a real account, it's a used account. So GDPR, it's opt-in. Next element of GDPR is the information. When it's gathered, you have to be clear what information you're collecting, why you're collecting that information, and then you can only use it for that purpose. So we have some serious issues with anything like that in the States right now. Doge, when they went in to all the agencies earlier this year, who knows what data they collected? They siphoned our data. It went into a cloud account. Who's using it? Where did it go? What are they using it for? And there is no answer that we have at the moment for that. So that is very much against European logic with GDPR. It is, the European Union has identified 30 countries that Europeans can take their data and put that data into another country with no problem because they have laws that are on the same lines as GDPR. US is not one of those. We don't protect personal data. We don't care, it seems, in this country, what somebody does with that personal data. Like ICE right now, they're tapping into surveillance system that has been built using Motorola, Thomson's, Reuters, with watching license plates. We have license plate readers on cop cars. We have license plate readers on stationary license plate readers that are out there. And they're just collecting information. They're collecting our travel history. They're collecting where we were. You can put together a dossier as to where somebody has been, where they've traveled, who was near them, who traveled the same routes as them, who lives near them. So with these dossiers, it's possible to track people down, which if we're talking about true criminals, really, really bad guys, then that system is really quite critical for law enforcement to be able to track somebody down, figure out where they are, figure out what they're doing, figure out what they've been up to. So those systems that ICE has access to does, I feel, have a purpose. It has a use, but the constraints are not there. There are no laws regarding how the information can be used, who can use that information. So what has to happen is Congress needs to tighten the reins, make sure that we pull things together to control what's going on. It's just incredibly critical that Congress does their job and reins people in. So this collection of license plate information, sharing it with ICE, none of that is in compliance with GDPR. It's opt-in. We need to know what our information is being used for, where it's being used, how it's being used. The information must be protected. You actually have a right to know what data a company has about you. Like you walk into your average Pizza Hut in anywhere in Europe. Yes, they have Pizza Huts. You can walk into Pizza Hut in Europe and walk in and say, hey, what do you know about me? The person behind the counter may not be able to answer that question, but they must respond appropriately. Response, like, here's the business card, call these people, contact these people, and they can access that information and give you that information. Or if you walked into a Pizza Hut in the US and said, hey, what do you know about me? Who knows what kind of answer you're going to get. So you have a right to know what information a company knows about you in Europe. You also have a right to have it be correct. Like your name, it's your name. Your name should be correct in anybody's system. It's your right to have your data be correct in the system. We're in the US, good luck. My name gets misspelled so much. People like to add extra vowels in my last name Doesn't seem to have enough vowels. So it's just Bettwy. It's spelled correctly. No vowels needed. We got everything we need there. So you have a right to know what somebody knows. You have a right to have it be correct. One of the new fun things with GDPR is you have a right to have your data removed. You have a right to be forgotten. You can contact any company and say, hey, delete me. I don't want my information in all these different locations. Delete my information out of your system. Good luck with that here. Good luck with that. So the company has to do their best to delete any information that they have about you in Europe if you don't want that company to have your data, unless the company has a good reason to retain that information. Where in the US, calling a company and saying, hey, please delete my information is just not likely to go well. And with the information being shared between agencies for who knows what purposes, trying to even track where your information is these days is really, really difficult. So, fun in Europe, you have a right to be forgotten unless the company has a reason to keep your data. Like you can't call the government and say, hey, forget about me. I don't want to pay taxes anymore. That doesn't work. But in the US, you don't have those rights. You don't have a right to request that your data be, well, you can ask, but who knows what's going to happen. California has that new law, the California Consumer Privacy Act, where you can request. It's a good first try. And that's generally how things work in the US. We get these new laws in California, and then they get revised, and then they slowly work their way across all the different states. But with CCPA, the California law, you can request to have your data be deleted, but it's not a right. In Europe, you have a right to be forgotten. So GDPR really is quite critical to understand. Another element is they cannot sell your data. In the US, companies live off of it. There's companies that's all they do is they collect data and they sell data. There's data brokers. They collect data, they sell data. In Europe, it's not legal to sell your information. It's your information. You have a right to have your data be controlled. You have a right to have your data be in the right places that you approve of. And that data is only used for the purpose for which it was gathered. We're here, in Europe, what I found teaching in Europe is they look at their information. It's my name, it's my address, it's my phone number. I have a right to control my data and who has access to it. Where my American perspective, yeah, it's my name, my address, my phone number, but it's not mine. I'm not in control of it. Who knows exactly where all my information is? Who knows exactly who has all my information? What data broker has my information? What dark web places have my information? Who knows? I'm not in control of my information in the States. Oh, what other elements of GDPR? It'd be nice if we had laws like that in the States. Companies, I found, don't seem to want to actually institute this stuff in the States. It'd be a lot of work. It'd be a lot of work to actually put in those controls. And like I said, there's companies that's all they do is they collect and sell data. So they would lose their businesses unless they merge or evolve to something else. So my experience, companies in the US don't want to control our personal information. It's kind of an issue. That's what I think. How are you guys doing? Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Just talking about information security, CISSP. If you have any questions, let me know. This is Lily. She's here to help. What she does. All right. So talking about laws, the new outline with CISSP has me thinking that we have to go back to some stuff that I used to teach a long time ago, and it's the basics of our legal systems. So in the US, we are under common law. And that was enough to lose everybody that was here. All right, so with common law, the common legal system basically follow the British. With common law, The judge's responsibility is to interpret the law, which is why we have so many shows like Law and Order, SVU, things like that, where people like to come in and argue and debate laws. Well, in this court case, this is what happened. In that court case, this is what happened. But the law, the way it's written and who intended it and when it was written, oh, so much fun. So in common law, the judge's job is to interpret the law, figure out how it applies to something. You'll find common law wherever the British settled, colonization, invasions. So you'll find common law in the UK, Scotland's, all the other countries within the United Kingdom, but the US, Canada, Australia. Strange thing about the US, Louisiana, the state of Louisiana is actually not under common law. They function under civil law or civilist. Same with the province of Quebec in Canada. They're not common law. So common law, the judge's job is to interpret the law. Under civilist law, sometimes called civil law. Oops. Well, that was fun. The holder decided not to hold it any longer. But under civil law or civilist, the judge's job is to enforce the law, literally the letter of the law. There we go. So enforcing the letter of the law, which is actually how things work in Louisiana, how things work in Quebec. It's follow the French. So most of Europe, Western Europe, most of Africa, the continent, there's 40 some countries there, a lot of South America. It's actually the most prevalent legal system on the planet is civilist. Under civilist law, the judge's job is to enforce the law, enforce the letter of the law. There's no interpretation. Their job is to see if what you did actually matches to that law, and if it does, then you can be found guilty. There is usually no jury under civilist. So you'll find that again in Louisiana and the province of Quebec in Canada, which is weird because most of the US and Canada is common law. So those are the two most prevalent legal systems on the planet, the civilist and common law. Civilist, being commonly referred to as civil law, will cause some confusion. So under both of those categories of law, major legal systems, under it you have three primary categories of law. And in the US, we call it administrative, criminal, and civil. And that's where we get some confusion. So it's better to call it tort law or where we have our lawsuits. So in the US, we have three types of law: administrative, criminal, and civil. Administrative law is going to be things like HIPAA. It's going to govern specific industries. So HIPAA says to the medical industry, you have to control patients' privacy. You have to make sure that their medical records are only shared with the patient or their parents or somebody else that they approve of. So kind of similar to GDPR in Europe, but not quite. It's kind of close. It's the closest thing that we have, I think, in the States to GDPR in Europe is going to be HIPAA. And then we have criminal law. Criminal law are the laws that have been enacted to protect the public. It is illegal to kill somebody, murder somebody, shoot somebody, hurt somebody. That's going to fall under criminal law. Civil law is, I feel wounded. There's no physical, I feel wounded. So under criminal law, it would be the state or the government, so state level government or federal government against a person, where civil is going to be person to person, company to company, company to person. The government's not involved. So under civil law or tort law, and it's where we have our lawsuits. And we could have, I feel wounded because you said something bad about me, or you wrote something bad about me. And dog is moving on. So civil law in the States is lawsuits, where the major legal system of civil law is not the same thing. That's what you find throughout Europe, most of Africa, most of South America, where the judge enforces the law as opposed to interpreting the law. Now, there is another category of law that does exist on the planet, and it's religious law, which there's a lot of in the US these days about Sharia, which isn't quite what we're dealing with. Well, it fits under religious law, but it's not what we're dealing with in the States. Well, kind of, we're heading that way. So we are. So religion, I'm not happy about it. Religious law, the one last truly remaining place on the planet that is a true religious legal system is the Vatican. Vatican City is its own state, its own entity, and the head of the religion is the head of the state. So the Pope is the head of the religion, therefore the head of Vatican City. He rules Vatican City, and it's ruled under the good book, or in that case, the Bible. If it's Sharia or Muslim law, people say Muslim law is actually Sharia, but it's a religious legal system that the religious leaders would enforce the laws of the Quran. I think the puppy needs to go outside. How do I don't know. So following the Quran, but in the U.S., what they are working on deploying in the U.S. is a religious legal system enforcing what the Bible says in an evangelical interpretation throughout the U.S. That is religious law, or in Arabic, Sharia. So I think it's Arabic. All right, so major legal systems. Just a little bit about it. So I said under common law, we have three categories under common law. Same is true under civilists. They have the same three categories. So there are lawsuits that can be done across the planet, but nobody does it quite as well as we do in the States. That's what I have to say. I think that's about it. I think we're going to call it quits for today. My dog needs to go out. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Have a good day.